She sits at the grand piano, rain-kissed and silent, a soft white cloth covering her eyes. Blind, but full of unseen strength. He stands beside her, the billionaire with a broken past, suit damp from the storm, eyes fixed on her like she's the only truth he's ever known. In the quiet glow of the fireplace, between torn paper and tender silence, love begins, not with a kiss, but with the courage to truly see each other. The town of Willow Creek was the kind of place people passed through but never stopped in. The houses were old, the streets cracked, and dreams rarely made it past the county line. It was a town forgotten by time and by hope. In one of the oldest houses at the edge of town lived Lena Carter, a woman as beautiful as she was broken. Her long chestnut hair fell in waves down her back, and her pale blue eyes, though blind, held a depth most sighted people could never understand. Lena had lost her vision in a car accident when she was 10. The crash took more than her sight. It took her father, her laughter, and her sense of safety. Since then, her world had been painted in darkness, colored only by sound, scent, and touch. Her mother, Marjorie, never recovered from the loss of her husband. Grief twisted her into something bitter. She drank too much, cursed too often, and saw Lena's blindness not as tragedy, but as weakness. "You'll never make it out there," she'd say. "You can't even see your own reflection. Who would ever want you?" Lena never responded. She just played the old piano her father left behind, the only thing that let her feel free. She dreamed of becoming a pianist, of performing in cities she couldn't see but longed to feel. She imagined the applause, the warmth of stage lights, the freedom of a life she controlled. But dreams cost money, and in their house, even food was a luxury. One stormy evening, Marjorie opened the door to a man Lena had never met, but whose footsteps sounded like thunder. His presence filled the room like smoke, thick, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. Ryan Blackwood, a billionaire, a name that echoed in the news, for hostile takeovers, for cold boardroom stares, for firing entire teams without blinking. He was tall, sharp-jawed, and icy. Every word he spoke sounded calculated, emotionless. Lena could feel his gaze on her as though it pierced her skin. She sat still, hands on her lap, pretending not to care. "I need someone. For a contract. She'll do," he said flatly. Marjorie didn't ask questions. She laughed bitterly, poured herself another drink and said, "As long as the money's right, she's yours." Lena's stomach dropped. She turned her face toward them and asked, "What are you talking about?" "You don't get to ask," Marjorie snapped. "You want food? A roof? Then you'll do this. It's just pretend. Smile, sign, and keep quiet." Ryan handed over a thick envelope. Inside was more money than Lena had ever imagined. Tens of thousands, maybe more. Lena felt her pulse rise. Her hands trembled. "Why me?" she asked quietly, her voice like a violin string, stretched and uncertain. Ryan's answer was cold. "Because you don't matter. No one will look into you. You're invisible. I need a ghost, not a partner." The words cut deep, but Lena didn't flinch. She knew this world didn't see people like her. It only saw weakness, shadows, burdens. She looked toward the space where Ryan stood and said, "If I'm invisible, you'll never know what I'm capable of." He didn't respond. He didn't care. That night, Lena packed a single suitcase, filled with only the few things she loved: her father's piano sheet, a worn scarf he gave her as a child, and a tiny music box that played her favorite lullaby. She left without saying goodbye to her mother. In the back seat of Ryan's luxury car, Lena sat in silence. She couldn't see the trees rushing by or the city lights approaching in the distance, but she felt something stir inside her. Not fear, but fire. She whispered to herself, "They may have bought me, but they don't own me." Ryan sat in the front, talking business on the phone, as if she were just a package. But Lena was no package. She was a storm, quiet now but ready to rise. When they reached his penthouse, she was led into a world of glass, marble, and silence. No laughter, no warmth, just wealth wrapped in shadows. "You'll stay in the guest wing. Don't touch anything "Don't speak unless spoken to," Ryan said coldly. Lena nodded. She didn't need to see the walls to know they were meant to keep her out, not bring her in. That night she lay awake on silk sheets, wondering what she had done and what fate had in store for her. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Instead, she reached for the music box, wound it gently, and let it play into the night. Each note was soft, but defiant, just like her. Somewhere in the silence of that giant house, Ryan paused as he heard the music echo through the hall. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He didn't know it yet, but his life had just changed forever. Because he hadn't just brought a blind girl into his world. He had invited in someone who would teach him to truly see. The gates of Ryan Blackwood's estate opened with a low groan, like the breath of some ancient creature holding secrets no one had ever dared to face. Lena sat quietly in the back of the sleek black car, her fingers tightly wrapped around the handle of her small suitcase. As the car pulled into the circle driveway, she could hear the distant hum of fountains, the quiet rustling of manicured hedges, and the heavy silence that draped over the house like a funeral veil. The mansion was massive. She could feel its size in the echoes of footsteps, the coolness of the marble floors, and the emptiness of its breathless hallways. Every corner smelled of expensive furniture polish and something colder, something like loneliness. "Welcome to your new home," Ryan said, but his voice lacked even a flicker of warmth. Home. She flinched at the word. He led her to a guest wing, her own private suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, a fireplace, and more space than her entire childhood house. But Lena didn't smile. She stood still, holding her breath as though waiting for the silence to hurt her. "I have rules," Ryan said, standing stiff in the doorway. "Don't touch anything that's not yours. Don't ask questions. Don't wander. Don't get personal." Lena tilted her head. "Anything else, Your Majesty?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the hallway like the tail of a ghost. The days were long. Ryan left early every morning and returned late. Lena rarely heard him speak. The house was operated by staff who were polite but distant. Everyone moved like shadows, never quite touching her life. She wandered only where she was allowed, her cane tapping softly on the floors. She memorized the space with her feet, with her hands, with the wind brushing her cheeks through half-open windows. There were no pictures on the walls, no laughter in the air, no signs of life, just perfection polished into hollowness. She'd grown up with cruelty, but this was different. This was emptiness. Lena was blind, yes, but she could sense energy. She could feel sadness hanging in the rooms, tucked into the corners like dust no one bothered to clean. She could hear the heaviness in Ryan's silence. His voice, when he spoke, was always flat, always tired. She knew he was a man who carried more weight than any of his tailored suits could cover. She didn't try to talk to him, not with words. She tried something else. One night, when the house was quiet and Ryan had long retreated to his office, Lena found the grand piano in the music room, its lid closed, its keys untouched. She ran her fingers along the wood. It was smooth, cold. She lifted the lid. The moment her fingers touched the keys, she felt alive. She played slowly at first, a soft, uncertain melody, notes like fragile feathers falling onto glass. But as her hands moved, her soul began to open. Each chord was a page from her diary, each note a scream she never voiced. She didn't play for him. She played for herself, for the child inside her who had been forgotten, abandoned, silenced. But Ryan heard. He stood outside the door, frozen, listening to a song that seemed to bleed straight from her veins. He wasn't a man moved easily. His world was built on logic, control, silence. But something in her music unraveled him. Something in those broken, beautiful sounds made his chest ache. He didn't understand it. He didn't want to. So he walked away. But the next night she played again. Every evening, when she was sure he was hidden in his office, she returned to the piano. The music changed each night, sometimes sad, sometimes hopeful, sometimes angry. It was the only way she could speak, and Ryan, whether he wanted to admit it or not, was listening. He found himself staying later in his office just to hear her. Once he stood outside the music room and watched her, her delicate fingers gliding over the keys, her head tilted toward the sound, her lips parted slightly as if tasting every note. She looked like a statue of light inside his house of shadows. She wasn't what he expected. He had thought she would be meek, obedient, silent, a pawn on his chessboard. But she was none of those things. She didn't ask him for anything. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't flinch when he was cold. She didn't seem afraid, even though she had every reason to be. She walked through his mansion like she belonged there, not because of wealth, but because she carried dignity, and dignity was something money could never buy. One night he approached her, just a few steps into the room. She felt him. "You don't play like someone who's afraid," he said quietly. Lena didn't stop playing. "I stopped being afraid a long time ago. Fear doesn't help you when you're blind. You either live with it or you learn to play louder than it." Ryan had no response. The music swelled, rising like a confession. For the first time, he sat down across from her. Not next to her, not too close, but close enough to listen, not just hear. She finished her song. Silence settled between them. He cleared his throat. "What was that one called?" "It's not called anything," she replied. "It's just what it feels like to live in your house." He looked down. "It's beautiful," he said. She smiled, a soft, sad smile. "Then maybe you should try living in it too." From that night forward, something shifted. Ryan still wore his suits, still left early, still lived behind locked doors. But he left the music room door open. And Lena? She kept playing. She didn't know it yet, but her melodies were starting to peel back the walls he'd built around his heart. She wasn't just a guest in his house anymore. She was a light inside his shadows. And soon her warmth would force him to face the one thing he feared most: feeling again. Time passed slowly in the mansion. Days bled into nights, but something unspoken had begun to grow between Lena and Ryan. Not closeness, not quite friendship, but awareness. A shift in the air, a quiet acknowledgement. They didn't talk much. Not at first. But silence wasn't always empty. Sometimes it held the most honest truths. Ryan started lingering near the piano room longer each night. Lena noticed. She didn't say anything, but her songs began to shift. The sadness softened. The hope grew louder. And slowly the walls that once stood so tall between them began to crack. One gray afternoon, the rain fell gently against the tall windows. Lena sat curled up near the fireplace, reading Braille poetry, her fingertips brushing the pages like a lover's touch. Ryan entered, phone in hand, but paused when he saw her. Peaceful, alone. "Ever read anything that doesn't make you cry?" he asked, voice light, almost teasing. "Only the things worth reading," she replied. He smirked. "Fair." There was a pause. Then, to her surprise, he sat in the armchair across from her. Not as a CEO, not as a man hiding behind Armani suits, just Ryan. "What was your childhood like?" Lena asked suddenly, surprising even herself. He looked away. The question sliced through him. "I don't usually talk about that." "Neither do I," she said gently. "But I'm asking anyway." Ryan stared at the fire for a long time, the light flickering in his eyes like buried ghosts begging to surface. "My parents were murdered when I was 8, he said, his voice like crushed gravel. Lena froze. "Murdered?" He nodded slowly. "They were a mixed-race couple. My dad was white. My mom was black. We lived in a small town in Texas. People smiled in the day and spit hatred at night." Lena's breath caught in her throat. "They were coming back from a dinner anniversary. Someone followed them, ran them off the road, set the car on fire." She covered her mouth. "Oh my God." "They called it an accident, but everyone knew it wasn't." His voice darkened. "My uncle took me in, not out of love, out of greed. He used my trauma to get sympathy donations, life insurance, business connections. I learned fast. Trust no one. Love no one." He leaned back, jaw tight. "Wealth became my weapon, my wall. It kept people out, kept me from ever needing anything again." Lena's chest ached. She reached across the table, slowly, carefully and placed her hand near his. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He didn't pull away. "I didn't expect to ever tell anyone that," he said. She smiled softly. "Sometimes, the right silence can pull a truth out better than any question." Later that week, he returned the vulnerability. They sat by the piano. She wasn't playing, just feeling the keys with idle fingers. He asked, "Why don't you ever talk about your family?" She let out a breath. "Because they're not family, not really." Ryan turned toward her, waiting. "My mother used to say I ruined her life. She said I should have died in the crash, not Dad. She said having a blind daughter meant she'd never have the life she deserved." Ryan's jaw tightened. "She said that to you?" "Almost every day." Her voice didn't shake. It was a truth she'd repeated so often. The pain had been folded into her bones. "She didn't raise me, she managed me, like a problem. I learned to be quiet, invisible, because speaking up meant getting punished." Ryan looked at her like she was something delicate, like if he blinked too hard, she might disappear. "But you're not invisible," he said softly. "You're remarkable." She laughed bitterly. "Not to most people. I'm either a burden or an inspiration. No one ever just lets me be a person." Ryan's voice dropped. "I see you, Lena. I don't know why or how, but I do." And she believed him. Because in that moment, two broken people weren't defined by money or disability. They were simply human, sitting in the same quiet, breathing the same heavy air, carrying scars they never asked for. They began sharing small things. He told her about his mother's laughter, how it used to echo through the house like bells, how he hadn't heard laughter like that since she died. She told him about the music box her father gave her, how she wound it each night to feel less alone. He started leaving her books in Braille, poetry, philosophy, even jokes. She left handwritten notes outside his door, small, thoughtful things. "You look tired this morning. Eat something." "I played Chopin tonight. I think you liked it." "It's okay to rest. Even gods need sleep." He didn't always respond, but he kept every note in a drawer. One evening, Lena asked, "Do you ever feel like the world was never meant for people like us?" He looked at her. "All the time." "But we're still here," she said. "Still breathing. That must mean something." He nodded. "Maybe we're the ones who are supposed to fix it." Their bond was quiet, slow, built not on drama but on depth, not on grand gestures but on shared pain, mutual respect, and the kind of understanding that doesn't require sight, only presence. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But every word between them felt like a thread weaving something unbreakable. For the first time in years, Ryan began to look forward to coming home. And for the first time in her life, Lena stopped counting the days until she could escape. Because somehow, against every odd, every rule, and every wall, they were beginning to heal, together. Autumn settled over the estate like a silent symphony, wind brushing the tall trees, golden leaves swirling across the marble steps, and the air sharp with change. But inside the mansion, pressure simmered. The piano, once a nightly ritual, remained untouched for days. Tension had entered the space between Lena and Ryan like an invisible fog. Because the contract, the lie that had brought her into his life, was being called to life again. Ryan's phone buzzed constantly, his legal team, his advisors, his accountants, all circling like vultures. "She signed the NDA. Push the marriage," they said. "It's time. The inheritance window closes next month. She's already living with you. Just make it legal and move on." To them, Lena wasn't a person. She was a placeholder, a body in a dress, a chess piece to win a legacy. Ryan hadn't told her yet, but she knew. She always knew. One morning, while making tea in the sunlit kitchen, Lena said softly, "Your lawyers call you 5 times a day now." Ryan, caught off guard, looked up from his coffee. "You heard that?" "I don't have to hear the words to feel what's happening." She turned to face him. "You're going to ask me to finish the lie, aren't you?" He didn't respond, and that silence was answer enough. Later that evening, Lena stood in the music room, her hands resting on the piano, but she didn't play. Not this time. When Ryan entered, dressed in one of his signature charcoal suits, she didn't smile. He looked at her, strong, silent, waiting. Then she said the words that cracked his world. "I won't be your lie anymore." Ryan blinked, stunned. "I agreed to help you when I was desperate. I agreed because I had no choice. But I do now." Her voice was calm, clear, but laced with sorrow. "I deserve more than being your convenience." "Lena," he started, but the words didn't come. "Number, let me finish." She stepped closer, her voice trembling but fierce. "You say you see me now, but if you did, truly did, you'd know I'm more than a contract. I'm not for sale, Ryan. Not anymore. Not ever again." He had been in boardrooms with billion-dollar deals on the table. He had silenced rivals, ended careers with a look. He had built empires, but never, never had someone looked him in the eye and said no like that. He didn't feel angry. He felt ashamed, because she was right. He had let the old version of himself make decisions. The cold, survival-driven man who believed attachment was weakness. But Lena had already melted that version, bit by bit, day by day. And still, he'd tried to keep her on a leash. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked over the hills, wind howled like a beast at the gates, and rain slammed against the glass windows with fury. Lena stood by her window, feeling the vibrations of the world unraveling. She couldn't stay inside. She needed air. She needed escape. She took her cane, her scarf, and slipped barefoot into the garden, the only place that had ever brought her peace. But the storm wasn't gentle. Rain soaked her dress within minutes. Wind snatched her scarf. The carefully memorized garden paths blurred in the storm's fury. The cane hit wet stone, then nothing. The trail vanished. Lena's heart pounded. She turned, disoriented, slipping on wet leaves, panic rising in her throat. "Ryan?" she called, but the wind swallowed her voice whole. Inside, Ryan looked up from a document. Something felt wrong. He went to her room. Empty. The back door, open. Lightning flashed, and for the first time in years, he panicked. He ran, out into the storm, calling her name again and again. "Lena!" No answer. "Lena!" He ran through the hedges, through mud and rain, suit soaked, hair wild, fear slicing through him like a blade. He found her near the rose garden, curled beside a stone bench, shaking and wet, eyes wide with helpless frustration. "Lena!" He dropped to his knees, grabbing her shoulders. "What the hell are you doing out here?" She choked back a sob. I I couldn't find the path. Everything was gone. I thought I knew this place. I thought I belonged." His hands cupped her face, rain mixing with her tears. "You never saw me," she said, voice breaking. "Not really, no one ever does." Ryan's breath caught. For the first time in his life, he was the one trembling. "I do now," he whispered. "God, Lena, I do." He pulled her against him, wrapping his arms around her tightly, as though trying to protect her from every hurt the world had given her. "I see you," he said again, over and over, like a prayer. "I see you." Back inside, he wrapped her in blankets, made her tea with shaking hands. He didn't speak until she was calm. Then he knelt in front of her and placed the contract on the table. Without a word, he ripped it in half. Then again, and again, until it was nothing but paper scraps and silence. "I want you," he said. "Not a deal. Not a disguise. You." Lena touched his face. "Then don't love me because you need to. Love me because you choose to." He kissed her forehead reverently. "I do." Outside, the storm finally passed. Inside, something new had begun, because the contract had crumbled. But what had risen in its place was real, a fragile truth, soft but unbreakable. Ryan canceled the contract. No marriage, no lies. But he asked Lena to stay, not as a fiancée, but as herself. She agreed, but only if she could start a music school for blind children, funded by his charity. They worked together side by side. Ryan changed, smiling more, helping others, standing against racism and ableism in his company. The media began to call him the CEO with a soul. He didn't care. Lena did that to him. They slowly fell in love, not with looks or power, but with words, values, and healing. 2 years later, they married in a quiet ceremony, surrounded by children from the school they built together. Lena wore a white dress, and Ryan cried as he whispered his vows. She couldn't see the roses, the candles, the guests, but she felt everything. In her vows, she said, "Love doesn't need eyes. It needs truth, respect, and kindness. You gave me all three." And Ryan answered, "You didn't just show me love. You taught me to see the world again." Final message. This story isn't about money, beauty, or saving someone. It's about how empathy defeats prejudice, how disability isn't weakness, and how even the coldest hearts can melt with love and courage. In a racist, judgmental society, Lena and Ryan proved true sight comes not from the eyes but from the soul.